We now live in an age of disasters, not to disaster Patrick. As a decorated disaster professional, CEO, author, and speaker, Patrick has over the last 20 years energized and transformed people worldwide through his unique disaster method. Now, Patrick is taking on the most difficult disaster management challenges in the world. He is on a mission to prove that
if you prepare for disasters, you'll never experience one.
Now that we've talked about how Jurassic Park accurately depicts the ready phase of disasters, now let's talk about the react phase, because this is going to be really interesting, because not a lot of disaster movies really show this in a realistic way. When you watch these big disaster movies, you see people acting in an exaggerated manner, doing totally illogical things. I can't help but groan most of the time when I watch them, but Jurassic Park was the first one I ever saw where people were behaving in a way that real people would act in a similar emergency situation. So let's get to it. In the react phase, people really behave in one of three ways. They either fight, flight, or freeze. In the fight phase, it means that they're actually fighting back. There is some way that they are actually going towards whatever the threat is. The flight one is where they go the opposite direction and they run away. And this is very traditional in disaster movies. You always see it, especially in these apocalyptic films, where people are getting out of their cars and trying to run away from all the, the extraterrestrials that are suddenly landing or the buildings exploding around them, because that happens all the time. And the last one is freeze, and this is what a lot of people do when they are faced with a disaster or an emergency situation. They just lock up, and Jurassic Park depicts all three of these reactions in a very realistic way. The first one is fight, and the scene I'm going to mostly be focusing on in this video is the one with the T-Rex, where the T-Rex initially attacks the SUVs. In this scene, you have two different cars. One car is filled with Dr. Grant and Dr. Malcolm, who are the two adults who are also scientists. They are in car number 2. And in the front car, you have the two kids, Tim and Lex Murphy, and then you have one adult. He's an attorney. He's also in the front, and his name is Donald Gennaro. That's what you have, and you have set around you this massive tropical storm. It's dark out, and then the power goes out, and then suddenly the T-Rex is able to touch the electric fence, which now indicates that the T-Rex can now leave the pen and move freely throughout the park. So let's talk first about fight. And what Dr. Grant does is he goes into the back and he takes a flare and he strikes a flare. He strikes the flare because he believes that by showing movement, and that's one of the recurring themes throughout the movie, by actually showing movement in front of the T-Rex, he will distract its attention away from the kids. So not only is he taking a direct path towards a threat, he's doing so to protect everyone else around him. That's not something you see in a lot of disaster movies, especially when people do these kinds of self-sacrifices. They do them in a very illogical manner. There's no scientific basis around them, or people are just doing it for the dramatics of it. The filmmakers are just simply trying to depict something very dramatic or sad. Not in Jurassic Park. It's done in a very scientific manner and done in a way to draw the animal away from others and towards himself. That is the perfect fight response. He doesn't have to have a rocket-propelled grenade or an automatic weapon. Instead, it's just a simple flare, where every other disaster movie is all about fighting fire with fire, when a lot of times that's not the way fight works. The second is flight, and in the same depiction, in the same scene, Donald Gennaro, who is the lawyer who is in the first car, is very much afraid, and this is probably, no matter how we feel, the way he reacted is likely how most of us would react if we were being chased by a T-Rex. He actually runs out of the car and he goes into one of the side huts, which is actually a bathroom, and he later gets eaten there. But what he does is fantastic. He immediately begins to hyperventilate. He jumps out of the car and then he runs. And that's a perfect flight response. And that's really the way most people would do it. And he just runs as fast as he can. He tries to hide. He doesn't do what a lot of these other disaster movies do, where people are running away from hazards for absolutely no reason or for illogical reasons, because they're trying to simply get away from an alien invasion. Well, if the aliens have already attacked, I'm not sure where you're going to be running to precisely. In a lot of other disaster movies, you see people trying to run away from floodwaters, or they're trying to run away from chemicals, when that's just simply not possible. Most people would realize you need to try to get into a building and go upstairs, not simply down the street. That is something that is completely illogical, but I see it in every single disaster movie. And the last one is freeze, and Lex's response is absolutely perfect because when she initially sees the T-Rex, she actually physiologically shows that freezing response, where in a lot of disaster movies, I see it as an affectation. They're either just trying to be tactical as if you're going to be able to fight back against the T-Rex, or you're going to fight back against some alien invasion. I don't know how in the world you're going to do that. People freeze, they try to freeze in sort of a tactical sense as if they're trying to get a one-up on the aliens, where that's not going to happen. But Lex freezes up in a way that most people that I have seen freeze up in emergency situations. She breathes in and she holds it, just like that. And that is the absolutely perfect response, because when people freeze, that's what they tend to do. They see a threat around them and they can't move, they can't fight back, and they don't run away, they just stay right in place. So for this reason, on the react phase, Jurassic Park is without question the greatest disaster movie of all time. In the next video, it's gonna be really exciting because now we're gonna get to the meat and potatoes of it. We're gonna talk about evacuation, shelter in place, and lockdown. And don't forget, if you prepare for a disaster, you'll never experience one.